Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled Prevent Major Data Breaches with Threat Lifecycle Management. We have a great presentation in store for you thanks to our sponsor, LogRhythm. I'm Emily McCafferty, the Online Event Coordinator here at ISACA, and I will be your moderator for this event. Before we get started, I'd like to go through a few quick tips. You have two audio options. One is to listen over your computer speakers. Two, you may dial in at any time using the numbers and the codes listed to the left. Please note, if you dial in, there may be a slight delay as the slides advance. All ISACA members can receive 1 CPE credit for viewing today's webinar. If you are watching this event live, you must complete 3 checkpoints. Simply click OK on the pop-ups that appear on your screen. If you are watching the recorded version of this event, your progress is being tracked, and you must watch from the beginning to the very end. To receive your CPE certificate at the end of this event, click on the Transcripts button within your My Learning portal, then click Submit CPE to take the required survey. We've made a job aid that goes over these steps in more detail. Click on the Papers tab to learn more or to download a PDF of today's presentation. Our speaker will be conducting a Q&A session towards the end of this webinar. If at any point you have a question, please click on the Q&A tab at the top of your screen, then select Ask New Question. If at any time you need technical support, please access the Help tab. Finally, if you have any questions about the CPE submission process or suggestions regarding our webinar series, please visit support.isaca.org. And now I'm very excited to be introducing our speaker. Today we have Seth Goldhammer joining us. Seth is the Senior Director of Product Management at LogRhythm. He has over 15 years of experience working in the network management and security industry, including starting Roving Planet, where he helped design and build go-to-market strategies for the industry's first network access control products. Seth has served in product management roles at Tipping Point, 3Com, and HP Networking, and is responsible for collecting market requirements and speaking at customer events for LogRhythm. All right, Seth, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily, and thank you, ISACA, for giving us the opportunity to speak to everyone today, and appreciate everyone's time. We're certainly hoping for a very informational session and looking forward to any ideas and feedback and questions that you have along the way. You know, the goals that we really have for today, for the next 60 minutes, is really we're going to take a look at how we've got into the situation that we are in terms of today's network security, IT security environment, and we're going to take a look at what are the solutions out there, what is available for us to be able to address the landscape that we do find ourselves in today. And so I'll provide to you a set of solution requirements that we are finding to be effective, and not just being able to detect and respond to threats, but where I see a big challenge is not just in threat detect, but it's threat detect in a highly efficient manner. And I'll explain why efficiency, in addition to effectiveness, is a huge part of the requirements here, especially when we're speaking to the security use case. So let's jump a bit into it. You know, so if we think about today, and looking at the last couple of years leading to today, what we have seen, and I'm sure as many of you, the reason why you're on today's webinar or listening to the recording is that we really do have what I would consider to be a pandemic issue. This is global in effort. It's increasing. Each year we're seeing more types of breaches, a variety of breaches in terms of scale and scope, and probably most importantly, the impact of these breaches across more and more types of organizations. So it's really not a matter of me thinking, hey, I'm just a small shop, I'm immune, I'm not a brand name target. You know, hackers are really going after low-hanging fruit. They're going after the anything and everything because they now have, and the reason why there's really no end in sight is because of a well-laid foundation for a marketplace for stolen data. And what that means is, through dark sites or social media, hackers now have a means to be able to collaborate with each other in ways that they haven't been able to do so before, and be able to monetize their efforts highly quickly and efficiently. which allows them to be able to build more tools, share those tools, share stolen information in ways that they've not been able to do so before, with a huge financial incentive for them to do that. So unfortunately, what that means, this cybercrime supply kill chain, this never-ending cycle means that we're creating more motivated threat actors that are incented by this supply chain, that is able to take advantage of this ever-growing attack surface, and the cycle continues. And that's why this is growing year over year over year in terms of scale, scope, severity of the breaches that we are seeing. So, and to give you an example here, it is not uncommon where one hacking group might go so far as to collect data about an organization. What are servers within that organization, server names, IP address spaces, and sell that, and now a different group that might have completely different motivations than that first group can now take that information and now leverage that for the lateral movement attempts as they're trying to access your network and find footholds within your network. So that ability to sort of hand off, if you will, the information that different groups may be collecting about us, and leveraging that to now get kind of deeper and deeper, if you will, into your organization, that is frightening. And unfortunately, they have the means to be able to do so in terms of social media and ability to sell information very quickly and anonymously. So, okay, that's the bleak picture. I think we all know this. I think that's why we're here. Let's talk about a little bit more about how we got here, and now and then where's the silver lining? Because after all, if there's no silver lining, this is going to be a pretty depressing webinar. So let's talk a little bit about more how we got here and why new security approaches really are required. And if you think about our current networking environment, and I've been in networking for a long time. I think Emily stated I've been in network security for 15 years, and my time as an IT network administrator actually dates before then. So certainly not a new problem space for me. I've really been focused on this for a long time. And we've traditionally been very tool-based oriented, and our tools that we're using were focused on looking at security through a very specific lens. And what I mean by that is, we've built up preventative technologies through endpoint security, through our firewalls, through IDS and IPS, through malware prevention. So we've got a defense in-depth strategy. The problem is our defense in-depth strategy is looking at a single data point at a single point in time to make a determination of what is a threat. And that is going to help us eradicate a certain class of threats. An IDS, an IPS, I worked for Tipping Point for a long time, and they have a very strong technology to look at the payload of a packet, understand if there's malware in that payload, and be able to block that flow. But again, that's looking at a single data point at a single point in time. Where the challenge really occurs is when it's not readily obvious with a single data point at a single point in time that it's a threat. And so what we're seeing is, and the reason, for those previous slides, we're getting bigger and bigger bubbles, if you will, of breaches that are occurring and impact to those organizations, is that those threats really require the recognition across multiple data points across time to make a determination of there's an emerging threat within my environment. And if we think about those data points, so network activity, endpoint activity, user auditing, user activity auditing, we have now multiple disparate systems generating and capturing activities that are occurring within our IT environment, but that ability to connect A plus B plus C is an emerging threat. That is extremely difficult when you're now operating across multiple disparate systems. In addition, all of the log, all of the audit data that those systems are generating, how do you recognize that one log is actually corresponding to an emerging threat when you match it up with other activities across other systems? So this is a huge challenge. This is not an easy challenge to solve, and this is why we're seeing the type of and the volume of attacks that we are seeing in recognition of that. especially as the perimeter is eroding, right? We, as commented on the previous slide, where we have, not just a single enterprise that we're trying to protect, but our devices are ever changing with the, BYOD type of world that we live in, the different types of devices that can participate, different types of users, including not just our employees, but guests and contractors, as well as the perimeter itself. Where is the perimeter when we now have applications that are here within our enterprise, but also in the cloud? We have users that are here in remote, coming in through wireless networks and wired networks. So the understanding of the enterprise networking environment is really deteriorated, and that makes a huge challenge for us in IT to really understand where are all the activities occurring, especially what are those activities that now are corresponding to some type of threat in my environment. And that's why many solutions are turning to some type of big data for analytics, because we need to capture lots of data, and then we need to be able to perform analysis on that data. And that analysis then needs to align to response processes. So if I do now discover A plus B plus C equals some type of threat, what do I do about it? How am I going to coordinate my incident response team or my analyst, or maybe it's just me because of the size of my organization? How am I going to coordinate that to now perform an efficient, effective investigation to be able to have all of the evidence to make determinations? And I like to think that when I talk to customers, it's really trying to solve three questions. We're trying to answer the questions of, are we hacked? Is there a breach? So is this a qualified threat? That's question number one. Question number two then is, if it is a qualified threat, what is the scope of that threat? What is the root cause of that threat? And this is where that big data analytics to mine that data becomes interesting from a solution perspective, but it's not the solution in and of itself. And I'll explain why we have challenges in just pouring data into some big data lake. That's not going to answer our fundamental questions of, is that a qualified threat? What's the root cause? What's the scope? Especially from an efficiency perspective. So we'll talk a bit more about that through this presentation. Now, the good news is I'm not the only one speaking to this shift from preventative technologies to detection capabilities. We've seen that shift where IT budgets across the board are starting to recognize the need for a more balanced approach. Gartner came, actually last year, they saw that shift, and they're estimating that from really a small percentage of our budgets focused on detection and response technologies, that's growing to over 60% over time. And we're seeing that when we're now talking to customers and prospects, as well as other analyst reports on IT budgets. We're seeing that shift. And that shift is to, again, have an appropriate balance between having the right protections in terms of preventative technologies, but as those preventative technologies can and will be evaded, do I have the ability to recognize that quickly, and be able to have the information to be able to respond to it as efficiently as possible. And so really what we're talking about is drawing down detection and response times. It's great to understand that you were hacked 3 months ago. And the lawyers, of course, will want to know this, as well as all of your stakeholders. But we don't want to be in a position as IT security professionals that we're telling our board, hey, we've been discovered that we had data exfiltration activity 3 months ago. We want to be in a position to say we recognize an emerging threat and we're able to block that threat from reaching its end goal before it occurs. And unfortunately, as an industry, we don't have a great track record today. Most of the time, attackers are able to, while they're able to compromise us extremely quickly, our detection is actually being tracked in months, not even in weeks, not even in days, but in months. Where if I'm a hacker and I've had 205 days to be able to explore your network, there's a very good chance that I've already found my initial target, and I'm looking for additional targets of information that I can monetize in black markets. So this is unfortunate, where the hacker is much more efficient in getting into our networks than we are able to detect them. And in fact, in most of the cases, the organization themselves was not who recognized the attack. It's by law enforcement. So FBI monitoring black market channels, monitoring areas like Pastebin, and saying, hey, these credit cards that are coming out that someone is now trying to sell or just sold, these all look like they're coming from this merchant, and being able to track it back to that organization. This personal identifiable information seems to all be coming from this healthcare organization. And that's not a fun way to start your day, with a call from the FBI saying, we think all of your customers' data is out on the internet. So we want to put we want to put people in position now to not only be able to detect threats that are occurring within the environment by themselves, but be able to do that from an efficiency perspective that allows them to block the actual goal of that hacker, that malware, from taking place. And the good news here is that that is possible. While I said hacks occur within minutes, we do see a very consistent attack life cycle occur when hackers are trying to get to their end goal. And that takes time. It may be days, it may be hours, it may even be minutes, but we do have time to recognize an emerging threat occurring within the environment. And what we see is a natural progression of stages that occur in an attack life cycle over and over and over again, regardless of the different methodologies that might be in use across this attack life cycle. And this puts us in a position to be able to recognize activities of particular types of stages. So I can see that there are activities occurring within my environment that we can associate to those of initial compromise, to those of command and control. And by linking those together, now I have an even better optics around an emerging threat and what is the actual stage of that threat currently. What stage are they trying to get to be able to look for those activities, as well as begin to take countermeasures and mitigations in effect. So there is good news here on top of the bleak beginning of my webinar. And the good news is that it can be recognized. And now I want to talk about the most efficient methods for recognizing these actions, with these activities within the attack lifecycle. And it really comes into what I call an end-to-end workflow for threat lifecycle management. That life cycle that threat's going to take, we're going to recognize it. We're going to recognize an emerging threat. And in order for us to recognize that emerging threat, as this is a big data problem, that means we need to start with data. We need to start with the acquisition of data. And we need to have a very rich pool of forensic data to be able to pull from. And that means that we do want to collect data not just from security devices, but this could be from applications, from network systems, from our systems themselves, as well as recognizing not all activities that occur within the IT environment are necessarily captured by log data. And so we do believe that there is a strong reason for having an ability to create your own forensic data with sensors. And having sensors on endpoints, having sensors in the network to gain greater visibility and to capture those activities that are not generally or usually available in log data in and of itself. And so what do I mean by that? Having a brighter spotlight, if you will, of what processes are running, what users are connecting, what registry changes are occurring, all within my domain controller and systems running critical applications or hosting sensitive data to my organization. So I don't necessarily need to have endpoint technology on every workstation, every system, but I certainly would recommend starting with protecting the core infrastructure in those critical applications for your organization, as well as the network. Certainly as we've seen in industry reports like Verizon data breach reports, the hacker does need to use your network to get around. Those are going to be those have an ability to be captured. Now, we might see that in firewall access logs. We might see that in IDS, IPS. But we also might have, if we have a legitimate user using legitimate credentials, that's very hard to track. IPS isn't going to necessarily see malware from that. Firewall isn't necessarily blocking. You're not going to necessarily look through all your firewall access allows. So what we're looking for are applications that might be really out of applications that might be just out of the norm. Why is this particular system? Why are we seeing applications from this particular system? And that goes beyond flow data, meaning that we need to have true application understanding at layer 7 of what that application is, because by port, by protocol, as a hacker, I know what your open firewall ports are. I know that you've got 443 open. I know that you've got 80 open, et cetera, right? And so they're going to use your standard ports they're going to look like as innocuous applications as possible. And so, apologize. Yeah, some people are having a problem with the audio, it appears, but we'll carry on for those who are able to hear me. So there is an ability to capture those applications and be able to then recognize those applications that's the out of norm, but that is going to take independent sensors to be able to recognize that. So we start with the need for pervasive visibility across the IT environment through the capture of machine data, log data, audit data, as well as independent sensors on endpoints in the network. We now have a very rich set of forensic evidence, but that's all we have. We just have evidence. And so now we really need to arm the analyst with the ability to discover threats within the environment. And we'll spend a bit more time drilling down into this area. It's certainly search analytics, your ability to just search against that data, look for known scenarios, look for your own hunting exercises into the data, as well as machine analytics. And this is where certainly more and more customers are relying more and more heavily is on the machine be able to recognize those activities and at least draw your analyst attention to those areas that really require their attention, that there is a true recognition of behavioral anomalies and maybe known patterns and be able to corroborate those in a way that helps recognize there is something truly concerning occurring that does need an analyst's attention. And that's where search and machine-based analytics now helps us to discover the threats. We'll dig more into this area through this presentation. Once I now have an area of concern, it's just that. I still need to qualify that, and I need tools to help me understand the real nature of the activity that has occurred. And that might be from an analyst perspective, how am I visualizing that data? Also, how quickly can I drill down and filter in that data to make a determination, is this a qualified threat? So as I've seen a system that now has an application I do not normally see from that application. If we wanted to take a real-world example, if this was a retail environment and perhaps we've got a RAM scraper on one of our point-of-sale terminals, so I'm seeing network traffic coming from a point-of-sale terminal I do not normally see. Maybe I've corroborated with that. There are now files being accessed on a point-of-sale system, point-of-sale terminal that I don't normally see accessed or created. I have a qualified threat. And so we need to be able to recognize that this is now an incident. We're now dealing with an incident, not just alarm triaging. And that allows us to recognize how long did it take us to detect this threat. So we now have a metric of success. From the time these network anomalies, file access anomalies occur to the time an analyst said, yes, this is an incident, we now have an ability to recognize threat detection time. And our clock now really starts on response time. We now need to understand how many other point-of-sale terminals are starting to look like this one. So that's scope. How did this happen? Going back in history of that point-of-sale terminal to recognize the introduction of some sort of malware, of a user who should not have access to that system, et cetera, to be able to get to a root cause. So again, we need tools to be able to quickly capture that information, visualize that information so we can understand very quickly what is included in search result sets and be able to drill into, filter against that result set to make those determinations of again, scope and of root cause. And now we're in a position to neutralize. So I've been able to recognize that I had a network access, a couple months ago onto that system from my HVAC network, which should not have occurred. And since then, there was a file that was introduced, and now that file is starting to generate processes. So I've got, and I'm not seeing that same process. I'm not seeing any other files accessed like that in any other point of sale terminal. So I've got an understanding of scope. I have an understanding of, or at least the beginnings of, root cause, but I'm now in a position to be able to neutralize this threat, being able to really block off that access, or eradicate that files and malware, eliminate those processes, or just take that point of sale terminal just offline and to be able to sanitize it completely. And now we can recover. And what I mean by recover is we now have a full set of evidence that we have used to make determinations. So having the ability to quickly go back through that evidence, how did we first learn about these anomalies? Could that have been brought to our attention even more quickly to reduce that time to detect? What information allowed the analyst to understand this was a qualified threat? Could that have been immediately brought to our attention through the initial alarming so that we could have more quickly got to a qualified step? What information helped us to understand how the access to point of sale terminal and what was happening on that point, or other point of sale terminals that may have looked like it? Again, being able to have a quick ability to perform that kind of post-mortem, if you will, and understand how we were able to make decisions and what could we do through our security analysis, through our security incident orchestration to be much more effective, much more efficient the next time a similar type of threat occurs. So this gives us a framework now to think about. Having technologies that allow us to complete each of these steps with effectiveness and with efficiency. So let me start. I said I was going to go back to the discovery part, because the discovery part is one of, obviously, the key moments here is how do we discover something that is concerning within our environment. And I'm actually going to start sort of in between what is forensic data collection and discovery. And it's in log analysis preparation. Well, what do I mean by that? I'm capturing logs from a variety of different types of systems, whether it's from my wireless access points to my switches and routers to applications, custom applications within my environment, et cetera. So we've got a variety of different types of logs from different types of vendors and devices and uses. I've complemented that with sensor technologies. So I've got a good set of forensic details, but right now all that forensic information, it's just noise. There's too much of it. How do I know what is what? And there's no commonality across it. Different activities, the same activity from two different devices that might even come from the same vendor might be called very different things in that log. Again, in just a real simple example, Windows might call this an authentication success, Cisco might call it a log-on success, and Linux might call that a log-in success. Those are all ways to represent that someone authenticated successfully to a system. And if I'm trying to look for everywhere an account that I believe could be compromised has accessed across the network in the last week or 3 months, I need to know that I've got a complete search, that those search results include all the access areas. And if I have to think about, as an analyst, all the different ways the different logs might call an authentication success, I'm doomed. There's no way that I'm going to be able to retain that level of expertise, which means we really need to prepare the data and create a common language out of that data across all of these different disparate systems. This is, the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. If I'm trying to perform analysis on the left part of this slide, all that noise, I'm going to get garbage out. I'm not going to get clean recognition of activities occurring within my environment because of all of the disparate esoteric messages that I'm trying to perform analysis on. And so we have to have a method for very cleanly understanding like-for-like activities across all of those logs. So it starts with uniform data classification. That is a key part of this, and having a data structure that I can now perform analysis on. Machine learning, and we'll get to machine learning in a second here, it is not going to be able to understand like-for-like activities without this training, without this coaching occurring before it's able to perform its machine learning algorithms. And then there's also contextual data that I can add to log data. So, if I just came in and I'm now changing the permissions of a different user account, well, I've got two different users. I've got me as the logged in user. I've got the account that I'm taking some sort of action on. And so the recognition of who is doing what to what. Again, if I have a system that is beaconing out to somewhere on the internet, I've got a system, I've got the source, I've got the destination, I've got directionality. In this case, directionality going out to the internet. So that's contextual information that we can infuse into our data that allows for stronger analytics to occur with more optics available to it as it's performing its analysis. So we're really looking for an ability to condition data to allow it to be really ready for downstream analytics, whether that downstream analytics is my own searching against that data or machine-based analytics. But without this preparation of data, I'm still going to have blind spots in my analysis, which is going to lead to false negatives, which of course is not the goal here. Now, in thinking about behavioral analysis, of course, a key challenge of behavioral analysis is understanding what is normal. And so the challenge here is if I think about all these different dimensions, if I look at just endpoints, we talked about processes and process monitoring before. How many of us today can immediately list out all of the appropriate processes that should be running on our production database servers? If you were to look at, if someone ran top, or if this is Windows, someone looked at Task Manager and showed you, here are all the processes that are currently running on your system, could you look at that and say, yes, those all look good, no, I'm not sure what that process is, this one looks bad? It's pretty difficult, and that's a static server that's likely we've had in our environment for years, decades. And that's just one attribute of one dimension. So understanding normal means that we need to look across all these different attributes of file access, of network direction, of user where users are accessing, the types of systems they access, the types of locations they go to on the internet. All of these different attributes across these different dimensions need to be baselined in some way and then recognize when those attributes are changing in some sort of statistically significant fashion. That is not an activity that a human can do. There's just too much volume, certainly, and by trying to do that, we're going to introduce a number of false negatives that we're just not going to see. The flip side is, if we're doing this too diligently, I'm going to start to see anomalies that are true anomalies, but they aren't actually of concern. I open up Notepad today, and it happens to be the first time I've opened up Notepad in the last 30 days, and none of my peers use Notepad. From a pure machine learning perspective, that is an anomaly. It's not something I normally do. It's not something my peers normally do. But you and I both know the fact that I open up Notepad is not concerning. And so, how does the system, how does the machine understand that ability of what it is an anomaly I do want to care about versus an anomaly I don't want to care about? That is a significant challenge, and if not met to, we're going to have a huge amount of unmanageable false positives that is now going to distract our security team from really looking at those activities that are of concern that did need our attention. So I want to talk a little bit about machine learning here, because I think there's a lot of in the market a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation about machine learning and how this is going to solve security problems. And I do think machine learning has a place here, but I do want to dispel some myths about machine learning. And so certainly I'm not going to dig into the real data science behind machine learning, but just at a very high level, let's discuss what is machine learning. Really, the means of the system being able to learn on its own those patterns or activities to be able to make determinations. Let me give a real basic example. I can give a machine learning algorithm examples of what fruit is. So fruit has these characteristics, and now I can then show it other examples and have it tell me, is that a fruit or not? So I'm going to give it, here's an apple, it's got this type of texture, this type of color, this type of shape, a pear, an orange. It's learning about the consistencies, commonalities across this, and now maybe I'll show it a banana and have it tell me, is this a fruit or not? I'll show it a picture of a pickup truck and have it tell me, does it think that's a fruit or not? So that's an example of machine learning, and supervised machine learning means that I'm providing it feedback. So when Netflix shows you, hey, you might like these movies, and you actually watch one of those movies, that is supervised learning. I've actually I've closed a feedback loop to Netflix's machine learning algorithms that said that was a good option. So you actually did learn my viewing habits and provided with me an example that I appreciated. Versus unsupervised learning is just, it's going to come back and say, yes, the banana was a fruit. No, the pickup truck was not a fruit. And I don't have an ability to teach it, to say that, wait a second, you got something right or wrong there. So let's think about that concept as we're now starting to think about machine learning. So if machine learning has now learned about, here are all the different processes that run on my system. Here are all the different users who access these types of systems. These are the locations that these users authenticate to. It's done a good job of baselining, of learning the different types of uses of my environment. But as I alluded to, the challenge here is security relevancy. We're not just looking for anomaly. That's not our use case. Our use case is recognizing threat, recognizing an emerging threat within our environment so that we can take action against that. So time is critical. Searching across the right set of data is highly pertinent to be able to meet to our cause, which means we can't just learn about anomalies for anomalies' sake. We need to have anomalies that understand some level of security relevancy. And this really requires now the fusion of behavioral analytics to what I would call scenario-based analytics. We need to corroborate our anomalies. In the case that I accessed Notepad, yes, it was an anomaly, but there were no other interesting activities occurring for my system, for my user account, the network connections I'm creating. So there's really nothing to suggest that that is a concerning anomaly. That should be suppressed. If I authenticate from a location to the VPN that I've never authenticated before, if I go to the same systems, use the same applications, generate the same network traffic, again, that sounds like a benign anomaly. We should suppress that anomaly. Versus I authenticate from a location that I haven't seen my account authenticate from before, and I'm going to different systems than I normally go to. I'm generating different network traffic types. I'm spawning new processes on those systems than those systems generally see. Now I've got a set of anomalies. I've got much more, I've corroborated that initial anomaly with other activities, whether they were other anomalies or maybe patterns. Perhaps maybe one of those IP addresses I accessed is on a low reputation score. Perhaps I went and created and deleted an account within a short period of time. So we can now marry multiple analytical techniques and group them together, whether we're talking about very basic patterns and advanced correlations, or we're talking about statistical anomalies or behavioral anomalies have been recognized. The ability to group those together can now help us suppress the benign anomalies or raise in significance those highly concerning set of activities that now do need our time and warrant our attention. And now we can begin the response process because we have an ability to, from a deep set of information, we've grouped together multiple activities that corroborate an emerging threat together. And if those activities are actually in recognition of the attack lifecycle, we actually even know what stage we're in. We've seen patterns and behavioral anomalies consistent with command and control type activities, and now lateral activities from that same host, from those same users. So we know we're in the lateral stage. We know that they're now trying to get to target attainment as a stage, so we can start to have a better visibility as an analyst what's happening, and now can begin the response process. Of course, the response process is all about, again, the common theme here is about efficiency. How are we going to do this very quickly? And in the response side, what now the challenge we're trying to address is efficiency, especially when we might have multiple analysts. We might want to incorporate multiple people on the team to search against different areas and be able to collaborate in that regard. There might be people even outside of the security team that we want to bring in to participate in that investigation process. I've seen someone who accessed an HR document. I've never seen touch HR documents before. They're not in the HR group. But as a security analyst, do I still have enough information, or should I pull in the HR manager to help make a determination very quickly of, yes, that user actually was authorized to touch that document at that point in time, or I have no idea why that user is touching an HR document. We need to expedite, we need to qualify this as a threat. So we're going to corroborate here, and of course, incident response starts with detection. So we've now detected our threat. We've seen, go back to my earlier example, on our point of sale system, we've seen a file that we haven't seen before. We're seeing network traffic come from that system we haven't seen before. We need a place to park all our data. We're now going to have other alarms might come in that look to be aligned to this threat. Log data that we're going to then search against and filter against that helps us understand activities occurring on that system, users who participate on the system. We need to pull into that. There might be network traffic, PCAPs, that we're capturing from particular points of the network, coming from the HVAC system into the point of sale system. So we need a place to park that. I know, unfortunately, I know too many security analysts that are doing this over email. They're sending attachments over email. They're writing, hey, look at this PCAP. Can you do packet layer analysis on this? Hey, can you go grab the logs from Windows Server XYZ? What happens if I'm doing this over email? One, I don't know what systems have been compromised. That means that the hacker may have an ability to actually watch us investigate him or her, which is kind of an interesting situation. They know that I compromised this account. Let me stop using that account. I'm going to use this other account that I've compromised. So we don't know what communication channels are protected or being watched. We don't know what user accounts have been protected or being watched. So blasting this out to all of the IT ops team, especially if you're using like incident management products, may not be actually helpful to our situation, especially when we're dealing with very sensitive data. So having ability to in a closed manner, control communication and park all appropriate data in a protected cache becomes extremely important to our cause. Now we can really start to pull in all that data. We need an efficient manner to get that data and pull it into that single retainer. Using multiple systems is likely not going to help us. If there's an ability that we can have a single entry point to all of this data to be able to fetch them very quickly into this container we've created, is now going to increase our efficiency and help protect the communications here of this. Where now we can pull in multiple people by allowing them to have access now to our container, so they can see all evidence in one point, in one area, and can very quickly get up to speed on what is happening, what are the evidence that's being used to understand this particular threat within our environment. And we need to be able to automate activities throughout this regard. Automating activities may be for more information retrieval. On that point, I've seen files that are being accessed that I don't normally see, network traffic that's being generated from this point of sale system. I want to do a memory dump right now to understand what's in memory on that system. If I take it offline, if it gets rebooted, I could lose very crucial information about malware that may be trying to perform activities on that system. So let me get a memory dump immediately. Maybe get a vulnerability scan of that system right now at that point in time. So automated tasks aren't always for remediation efforts. It could just be for information retrieval at the point of time that that information is crucial for the investigation. But certainly it could also be for, let's take the system offline, let's disable this user account, let's revoke this user from elevated permissions. So certainly there may be reasons we want to automate or semi-automate tasks. And what I mean by that is, if I want to disable a user account as a security analyst, sure, this account's authenticating in multiple locations. I can tell it's compromised. We've got to be able to disable it. I want to, but perhaps I can't automate that because I need to have my Active Directory administrator in the loop. And like two admirals on the battleship, they need to turn the key to be able to say, okay, we're disabling this account. So that's why I say semi-automated, where automated actions, or at least actions, can be teed up, ready to go, and take approvals from the appropriate personnel to now fire off that action. And now we have a very efficient response process. We've got all our evidence in a single container. We could bring the right people into that container at the right point in time. We've got tasks that have been teed up, aligned to the activities that we're seeing, that could either fire off automatically or are waiting approvals through semi-automated workflows. And now we can very quickly, as we're getting to questions of scope and root cause, by automating information collection that might be important to us, we can also begin the mitigation neutralization of that threat. Now, a couple slides here I want to speak to. The first is this particular approach I'm going to suggest is not very effective. And what I mean by that is, if I'm using one tool to collect logs, I'm using another tool to perform behavioral analysis against that data, I'm using another tool that's performing endpoint monitoring and collection and performing analysis on that particular data set. I've got another network sensor in its own brand of analysis performed on its network data. And I've got, on top of all of that, an incident response product that is now trying to take data from these disparate sets, turn it into something else as I'm trying to collect data about an incident. That is a highly inefficient manner, in that I've got multiple representations of the same activity across multiple different data silos that is going to be highly inefficient for me to try to perform analysis on. It really creates, and what we hear most predominantly from customers and prospects, is alarm fatigue, where I now have too many systems trying to get my attention, and I don't know what really needs my attention versus what doesn't need my attention. And so what happens is I get blinded. In many cases, if I go back to the very first slide, in all those bubbles, they were collecting log data in almost every case, but they were blind to the true emerging activity within their environment because of the sheer volume of systems trying to get their attention. It also creates swivel chair analysis. As I said, there's different representations of information as I'm trying to look at the activities that my endpoint analysis provided versus my network analysis provided, and being able to bounce back and forth between different interfaces, different analysis tools, and different representations of information. That is very difficult for an analyst. All that context switching for analysis takes its toll, and that toll is inefficiency through that workflow process. And that's because I've siloed forensic data. I don't have a common method or a common language by which I can call back into my data sets to perform my analysis, which is fragmenting my workflow. That's really where the inefficiencies are then manifest itself, is due to different user screens, different data silos, different representations of data, and all this competing alarm information trying to get my attention. And as a result, all those different, yes, we have multiple tools that seem to satisfy all the different steps of my end-to-end workflow, but ultimately are still not going to achieve the objective we had, which was preventing emerging threats, recognizing and being able to block that emerging threat before it reaches its end goal, because of while we might have the capability set, we don't have the efficiency means we need to have in order to fully satisfy our objective. So lastly, what does it then take to satisfy not just the capability set, but the efficiency needs that we need? It certainly starts with having a unified mechanism to go end-to-end across that workflow, from data collection to threat qualification to our response side of investigating and then mitigating that threat with automated capabilities throughout. It also is going to require that unified platform has holistic visibility. It can't just be siloed analysis on a particular part or a particular aspect of my network, but it really needs to understand network data, endpoint data, log data to be able to perform this effectively and efficiently. And that means that my search and machine-based analytics have been enabled by data that's been prepared for that type of analysis with consistency and commonality that it can draw from. That can enable, and we need to have the coupling of both scenario-based and machine learning types of algorithms that can allow us to corroborate multiple activities to recognize a highly concerning set of threats rather than just the benign anomaly we don't need to spend attention to. And then our security automation capabilities and our orchestration capabilities can leverage all of that data readily into a single container that we can bring the right collaborators into and tee up tasks from based on that specific type of threat that we've recognized. So I hope that this has given you a lot of food for thought in terms of not only the severity of the types of concerns that we now see in the environment, what's fueling those concerns, but how we can practice a true framework that can give us not only the capability set for detecting threats, but the efficiency means we need to be able to detect those threats at the point in time where we can do something about it, before that threat really has achieved its end goal of data exfiltration or network disruption. I hope that this has been a highly informative session for everyone, and certainly look forward to hearing your questions and feedback and how I can help you to be able to best address the needs that you have for your organization. And lastly, I'll throw out, so you can certainly contact me if you do want to talk to us at LogRhythm. We also will be at the RSA Security Conference next week, and certainly could take any additional questions with the team of people that we have there to be able to help you. At this time, let me stop and pause and see if there's any questions that I can answer for you today. All right, I'm looking through the questions, so just give me a second here. A question here just around kind of covering alarm fatigue, and for those of you who asked about that, yeah, that's probably the most common concern we hear from prospects, is this, that too many different systems trying to get their attention. The promise of SIEM over 10 years ago was to take IDS, the IDS was created to look at network traffic and to recognize network traffic that was concerning. But in order to demonstrate its value, many IDSs started, lighting up like, Christmas trees, trying to tell you about anything and everything. So SIEM came along and said, okay, we're going to reduce that noise to just those that are of concern. Many SIEMs that were created 10 years ago haven't been able to continue to innovate in a way that allows them to truly understand today what are concerning sets of threats. So unfortunately, there are SIEMs in the market today, or I should really say log management tools out there in the world today that haven't developed over time. And what they're doing is, unfortunately, creating more noise in an attempt to show its value. And I would say that the goal here is that SIEM is really should be focused on reducing, drawing down types of threats. If the SIEM needs to have some ability to score activities based on risk, and it needs to be able to group activities together automatically for you. If your SIEM or your log management tool is asking you as the analyst to group activities together through the course of investigation, that's going to lead to a highly inefficient method where, one, you are going to have too many alarms because the system wasn't able to help draw your attention to the right place at the right time. As well as when you drill into that alarm, you are now forced to be the one who's connecting the dots of that activity with other activities. If instead your SIEM, your security analytics solution, is in a position where it can group that for you and then give you an immediate ability to get to that set of information across those activities, now you have, not only were you aligned to look at the right thing at the right time, you also have the ability to very quickly get to that pool of evidence that the security analytics leverage to make that determination so that you can review and understand, is this a qualified threat, and begin already the steps for investigation, because you've got key evidence points of the users involved, the host involved, the type of, the nature of the activity to allow you to begin the investigation phase. So thank you for that question. So another question here was, should the step of neutralizing precede the step of investigation in the end-to-end threat lifecycle management? And this is suggested because of the swiftness, the gravity of the breaches these days. I would say that there are elements of neutralization that you could bring into the investigation process, but of course you need data behind that. And so the investigation process is helping you to understand what are those activities that can allow you to mitigate. You might, this user account is accessing a system you haven't seen before. You could begin by just disabling that user account. Of course, you're going to run into that dichotomy of, well, what's more important, that user, the actual employee behind that user account, is able to do things that day versus the security concern that you're faced with. And there are times where the security concern might be more important. There are times that the user access is actually more important, quite honestly. And so we need to ensure that we have an appropriate amount of evidence to now say, no, we have to take this account offline. It is clearly compromised. So that's why there is investigation that I would say is absolutely required before we can begin neutralizing to ensure that we have enough data points to make a determination. I think it's also why, and as Emily talked about at the very beginning, my roots are in network access control, and many network access control products were actually never used for quarantining. They were just used for information gathering. And it was because of an inherent distrust of the black box making a determination of should I allow this device, this user on the network or not. But if we can bring the human analyst into that decision workflow, but still have it very efficient from I just need to push the button. So I've reviewed the evidence, and yes, let's disable the account. I've reviewed the evidence, and yes, let's take this host offline. Now, hopefully, we can find the right balance between the human being able to make a determination, but very quickly be able to get to the neutralization steps. Now, it might not fully eradicate the threat, but at least we're degrading its ability to either grow, manifest itself within our networking environment. Hopefully that answered your question. And then last question here, as we're running out of time, is can SIEM identify internal threats like collusion among employees? That's a really good question. The internal threat is interesting. You've got a valid credential of a user, and now you're looking for, and this is again going back to that challenge of what normal looks like, how do we recognize that internal user is doing something that really they shouldn't be? So some of that's behavioral change, some of that's also internal context. For example, if I know I've got, if the SIEM could be fed with, here are the users who are on plan, meaning that they're close to being terminated with HR unless their activity improves. That might be, for better or worse, that might be a list I might want to monitor more closely. Because if I see a user, access a whole bunch of files, that's hard to say if that's really concerning or not. If I see a user access a whole bunch of files and they're on a list that they're on plan and are in the process of being terminated, now I've got more context to make a determination. That sounds concerning. We need to go, maybe we need to take this user offline immediately, rather than wait for some determination date that might take place. So some of that could be getting information from HR, which obviously is a sensitive topic, but we are dealing, obviously, the stakes that someone else was talking about are pretty high. So I think that would be important. So yeah, there are mechanisms that SIEM can identify internal threats, but it will take context in that regard. I want to thank everyone for your time. I'm going to turn it back now to Emily to help wrap us up.
All right, thanks so much, Seth, for that great presentation and interesting Q&A session. Also, a big thank you to our sponsor, LogRhythm, whose support has made it possible for ISACA to offer this event free of charge to our constituents. Don't forget to check out the Papers tab at the top of your screen to view additional information on submitting your CPE credit. This webinar was recorded, so you can go back to watch it from the on-demand program section in your classroom within the My Learning portal. I would like to once again thank everyone in our live audience for their attention and participation. Have a great rest of your day.